Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the West Yorkshire Combined Authority Tender Ready Training for School Bus and Swimming Services Procurement, reference CA for Combined Authority 89794. My name's Gillian Askew. If you've attended any of these sessions before, you'll probably know who I am, but for those that haven't joined us before, I'm one of 3 co-founders of a micro-social enterprise called Go for Growth, who are partnering with the Combined Authority to help support the marketplace on this transport procurement. So thank you for joining us today. Little bit of housekeeping before we get started. So I've introduced myself. Just to let you know, the session is being recorded today. A copy of the recording plus a PDF version of the slide deck will be circulated. So please don't worry about making notes unless you really want to. You can ask questions throughout the session today. We have both chat and Q&A functionality enabled in Zoom, so please do feel free to do either, and we have got some time laid out for questions at the end. If there aren't any questions as we go through or at the end, but you do later think of something, my contact details are in the slide deck as well, so you can get hold of me that way. So hopefully, regardless of when and if you have any questions, we'll be able to help you. So if we push through, just want to talk for a couple of minutes at the top of the presentation about the tender process itself. So you may be really experienced in public procurement. You might have bid for this or other combined authority or any other organisations, public sector procurements. But if you're new to it, this will just help bring the process to life a little bit. So generally speaking, what happens is there's an advertisement. So for the Combined Authority, that's on your tender, so you can find the procurement on there. But there are also some search engines that the Cabinet Office host, Contracts Finder and Find a Tender Service. So you can find an open opportunity through the advertisement process on either the search engines or the relevant procurement portal. And they're generally speaking advertised when they're above threshold. So you might hear me talk about threshold a couple of times in the session today. For goods and services, the current threshold, inclusive of VAT, is £214,904. So above that threshold in the public sector, if it's an open opportunity, it needs to be advertised on the procurement portal that particular organisation uses. And also on Contracts Finder or Find a Tender Service or both. So once it's been advertised, you will be able to download all the documents. And one of the first things you'll do is make sure whether you've got any questions or not that you want to ask. And they're classed as the clarification process. So any questions you might have that will enable you to submit or to decide not to submit your particular bid. And in this process for the Combined Authority, we're just in between clarifications and submissions. So the clarification questions, and I'll go through key dates shortly, has now closed. It closed on the 9th of September. But once you've answered all your questions, you'll then be in the business of writing your bid ready for submission. And you'll go through that submission process. Once you have submitted your bid, it then goes in for evaluation. So basically it's scored by usually individual evaluators, and then it will go through a moderation process to reach consensus on scores. It might go through panel evaluation, but effectively your submission and all the submissions will be evaluated. Out at the end of that, dependent on how the procurement has been set up, there may be winners and those businesses that have not been so successful. But ultimately, out of evaluation, there'll be an intent to award the contract to one or multiple providers. At that intent to award, bidders will be notified as to what the result is. So if you are successful, you'll be notified as such. And equally, if you've been unsuccessful, you'll be notified as such. And if you're unsuccessful, you should get some feedback with that. Over threshold, over that 214,904 threshold that I talked about, the procurement will then go into a standstill period. There may be standstill periods underneath that value, but it will be on a voluntary basis. Currently at the moment, that's 10 clear days, 10 calendar days. And then after the standstill period has completed, formal award will be made. We're currently under the public contract regulations of 2015, and so there are certain notices that have to happen in different parts of the process. When we move to the Procurement Act 2023, which is the new regulations that are coming, and that is due to go live no longer on the 28th of October, but now in February 2025. Those notices will be different. There will still be a contract award notice, but there are additional notices as well that will be a signal to the market of what's happened. And so the contracts process itself, I've broken it down into, I guess, the 6 key elements. So once you have seen the advertised procurement and you want to create your clarification questions to check whether you have any, you may not actually, but to check whether you have, you'll see a set of documents. So you'll go into something probably called the invitation to tender. And that invitation to tender may house the specification or statement of requirements, as the combined authority calls it. May well be a separate document, but effectively there'll be an invitation to tender which has got all the instructions for that procurement in it. At the front end of almost all procurements in the public sector is some sort of selection questionnaire. There's something called the standard selection questionnaire, and a version of that will be at the front end of the procurement. I've mentioned that there'll be a statement of requirements or a specification. You will, your bid will ultimately be scored. So in those documents, in the contracts process, you'll see that there is an evaluation criteria. I'm going to show you what the evaluation criteria for this procurement is shortly, and there'll be weightings per question. You'll ultimately, in any process, have quality or technical questions, and you'll also have pricing related questions. And included in those quality and technical questions may well be a social value section, and we'll talk about social value also today. There are legal terms and conditions, obviously, in the contracts process, and there is a feedback process. Whether you are successful or unsuccessful, you should get feedback as to why that is. You can see that some are blue and underlined. That's because we did some lunch and learn sessions in March this year, specifically focusing on the standard selection questionnaire, specification evaluation and those weightings, the terms and conditions and feedback. So when you get the slide deck out after this event, you can click through those, they're live links, and they'll take you to the video tutorials. So if you want to delve in a bit further, you absolutely can. So the documents for this particular tender for school bus and swimming services, you have an invitation to tender in there. You also have the statement of requirements, the specification, that's Appendix 1. And documents 3A, 3B and 3C, you have the social value invitation to tender. You have the combined authority TOMS, which is themes, outcomes and measures, the guidance from 2023. And you also have a local needs analysis, which was compiled in March 2024 at 3C. You have a pricing document, the contract, those terms and conditions is at Appendix 5. You have a TUPE confidentiality agreement at Appendix 8 and route lot information at Appendix 7. Just on the TUPE confidentiality agreement, if you are a potential bidder and you haven't yet filled out the TUPE confidentiality agreement, please do so and upload that through the portal in the messaging functionality. That will release whatever TUPE information there is, which will be really important to your ability to be able to price and understand what the liabilities and responsibilities in accordance with TUPE are. And that's the Transfer of Undertakings and Protection of Employment Act, and it is a complex piece of legislation. So please do, if you haven't already, fill out that confidentiality agreement and get that posted back to the combined authority. So of all those documents, what you actually need to submit is Appendix 8, that TUPE confidentiality agreement. It is urgent, as I said. If you haven't done it already, please do. And then through the invitation to tender, you will be completing Appendix 2, which is the selection questionnaire. You'll be completing Appendix 3, which is the award questions. And Appendix 3 has 3A and 3B. So the quality questions and timetable for Bradford Swimming Services using Appendix 7 template, and the pricing document, which is a separate document for 3B. You'll also complete Appendix 4, the form of tender, and you'll need to do your social value proposal in the social value portal as well. So the key dates for this procurement process, as it currently stands, the ITT was issued on the 23rd of August this year at 13:09. As I said, the clarification question deadline has now passed. That was at the 9th of September at 12 p.m. If you have asked any questions, the deadline for those responses, if they haven't already been responded to by the combined authority, is 16th of September 2024 at 12 p.m. And the deadline for submission of your bid is 24th of September, also at 12 p.m. The completion of evaluation and standstill period will be starting in week commencing the 21st of October. Standstill ends on the 31st of October, and contracts issued to successful tenderers is due on the 1st of November 2024. It's expected then that contracts will be signed and returned to the Combined Authority no later than the 11th of November 24, and the start date and commencement of services for that contract is planned for the 6th of January 2025. There's just a few things that the Combined Authority were really keen to be called out to make you aware of if you hadn't picked them out already. So at 8.2 in the selection criteria, you will be asked to confirm if your organisation has fewer than 250 employees. At 8.3 also, you will be asked to confirm that you can meet your obligations under GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulations. In 8.4 on the timetable, you'll be asked to confirm that you will adhere to the timetable proposed by the Combined Authority for the routes or the route that you're bidding for. If an alternative timetable is proposed, confirm that will arrive no earlier than 30 minutes before school starts and will depart no later than 20 minutes after school finishes. And at 8.5, in terms of capacity, you'll be asked to confirm that you can meet the minimum capacity requirements for all the routes that you're bidding for, as outlined in Appendix 7, routes and lots. And then at 8.6 under vehicle standards, you will also be asked to confirm that the vehicles that you will use for the delivery of the services do in fact meet the minimum vehicle requirements for all of the routes that you are bidding for. And there is a prompt in the quality questions for alternative routes if required. They can be uploaded via the quality questions. So there is something in the quality questions there around alternative routes. So in terms of statement of requirements, the specification, you will hear them termed as both things. What is it? Let me just dive into that a little bit more. So the statement of requirements is basically, it does what it says on the tin. It's effectively what the contracting authority wants to buy. And it's a really crucial document in any bid. And our advice would be, if you haven't already, read that through. Now, the clarification questions have already closed, but for this process, but it is worth, in the beginning of any procurement process, to read through the statement of requirements and work out which bits you can deliver, if you have any gaps, but also any questions that you might need to have clarifying as part of your submission. If you have any gaps when you look at it, you then can work out if they are substantial or material gaps and whether that would affect your ability to deliver what is required as is laid out in the statement of requirements. It's an important document, and you'll refer back to the statement of requirements when you're answering the quality and technical questions. It is worth noting that in those quality technical questions, you will only be scored on things that are included in the statement of requirements. So you should be able to see in the statement of requirements what it is that the Combined Authority in this case is trying to procure, and you can align that with the answers in the quality questions. So an evaluation criteria, what does it mean? There are two criteria in a procurement. So the selection criteria and evaluation criteria. Selection is generally a look at backwards almost, but looking at the business itself and what you have in place to be able to meet the needs. So do you have the right accreditations, licenses, insurances, etc.? Do you have all of the policies that you need? And selection will look at things like your technical capability, your capacity, and it'll also look at some things like your financial and economic standing. Evaluation is more about the contract specifics, really, and what you will deliver through the contract. So the questions are likely to be more framed about a look forward in terms of how you will do something. When you're answering those questions, if you can back those things up with evidence in terms of here's how we have done it, or we would do it, and here's the evidence of that, that's great. Those things will really help you. And if you can align with the statement of requirements and what's written in there to flow that through into your answers, then that's great. What the evaluation criteria will show you is what each score needs to have in it in order to meet that criteria. So it's usually 0 to 5, you might see 0 to 100, but there's usually around 5 levels of scoring. The top score being 5, for example, it will tell you what you need to be including in your answer to get that score. And this is the evaluation criteria for this particular opportunity for the combined authority. So you're 0 to 100%. 100% is classed as excellent. And what it does is it gives you a definition of what you would be including in order to be defined as excellent. So you'd be exceeding the requirements. So the same as in the good definition, but the tenderer additionally provides exceptional demonstration of its ability, understanding, experience, skills, resource and quality measures required to provide the services. The response also identifies factors that will offer potential added value over and above the combined authorities requirements as set out in the specification, with evidence to support the response. And you can see by contrast, at 0, which is an unacceptable score, it does not meet the requirement. So to score a 0, it would not comply, and it would have insufficient information provided to demonstrate that the tenderer has the ability, the understanding, experience, skills, resources and quality measures required to provide the services. And there will be little or no evidence to support the response. So you can use the evaluation criteria to test what you're putting in the answers to those quality questions to see whether you are ticking off value-added services. For example, have you got your evidence there? Does it align with the specification, the statement of requirements? Can you show that it is a demonstration in an exceptional way of your ability, understanding, etc., etc.? And in terms of answering questions, I've got a little bit more on the next slide about this, but what we tend to suggest as a mechanism to answering them is to take the question and break it down into the verb elements. So look for the doing parts of a question. This sounds like really obvious to say that you should make sure you only answer the question that's asked, but it's really easy actually to fall foul of that. So do only answer the question that's being asked, even if you want to tell something else, unless it's relevant. You'll be using up, potentially, if there's a word count, you'll be using up the word count for something that the authority isn't looking for. Do evidence your answers as much as you can, and don't forget to provide any documents if you're specified to do so, or if you're allowed to do so, that would be part of that evidentiary process. So, for example, and you might not be in this particular opportunity, but you in some opportunities might be asked to provide an implementation plan. So if you're asked to provide a document, please do make sure that you provide it. And just a note on word count, if a word count is at play, councils, the combined authority members, any public sector organisation, if they're using a word count or a page count, those things will be really strict. So use the word count wisely. Don't repeat the question. Don't waffle. If there's a page count, and I probably come on to this later, you will almost certainly be given a font type and size. And that's so that you can't just reduce the font size, so you can cram more into those pages. So the constraints that are put into any procurement are there for a reason. Don't go over them. Whatever you do, it will be redacted. And if you go over a page count, for example, you could even end up being disqualified because of it. So here is an example of a question from this particular procurement with both the constraints and the verb elements noted. So the doing elements are in yellow. So you can see that we are required to provide the total number of drivers that are or will be employed for the delivery of services, the number and ratio of spare drivers available, and that's about covering that absenteeism and emergencies. And then also the number of drivers with the appropriate licenses and certifications for carrying out regulated activity involving children and young people. And it's as described in Appendix 1 in the Statement of Requirements: PCV driver licence, cleared DBS enhanced checks, and the Certificate of Professional Competence card. So it's telling us there what it wants to know, and it's giving us all of the information that we need. In the second part of the question, in 2B, it's asking us to detail the training that drivers undertake. And it goes on further to tell us that we should include, as a minimum, but it doesn't have to be limited to just these things, safeguarding training, health and safety training, customer relations, and any other training given to drivers. And it asks us to explain how the training is delivered in practice, including frequency and if any external training providers are used, and how completion and outcomes of the training are monitored. It also asks us to summarise any safeguarding or health and safety policies that are in place and attach full copies of those. So we are asked for documents. So that's one of those things that we do need to make sure that we upload. And then finally, also to explain how the organisation ensures compliance with those policies and the training requirements. So when we put our answer together, what we can do is go back to our answer and tick off the parts of those questions that we've been asked to include to make sure that we've included them and make sure that we've uploaded those policy documents that they've asked for. And we can then check the constraints as well. So at the bottom, it says we have a maximum of 2 sides of A4 using 12 PT aerial. Attachments don't count towards the response length limit. So we know we've got to write in aerial 12, and we know we've got 2 sides of A4 to write our answer, so that we can do some really clear double checks, and we can go back to our evaluation criteria and look for these definitions in our answers. We can look for our evidence. We can look for us showing our understanding, our experience, our skills. We can go back to the statement of requirements because it tells us it's described in Appendix 1. We can go back to other parts of the statement of requirements to make sure that we've really flowed that through and included all our evidence when we're answering the questions. If we move on to social value now, most people might be aware of what social value is. It's driven by something called the Public Services Act, or you might hear it termed the Social Value Act. It's dated 2012. It was actually assented to law in 2013. And it effectively sets out some national priorities, and they are around a set of headings. So thinking about creating new business, for example, new jobs, new skills, fair pay, wealth building piece, but also tackling climate change, tackling waste, and thinking about supplier diversity, innovations and supplier resilience, certainly post-pandemic as well. And they are aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals. So there is a 2030 agenda for sustainable development adopted by all United Nations member states, obviously including the United Kingdom in 2015. And they provide a shared blueprint for peace and prosperity, effectively, for people and planet, both now and into the future. And at the heart of the Agenda for Sustainable Development are 17 Sustainable Development Goals, classed as the SDGs, under which there are a bunch of targets. But effectively what it is an urgent call for action by all countries, both developed and developing, in a global partnership. And what it's effectively trying to do is to recognise that ending poverty and other deprivations must go hand in hand with strategies that improve health and education, reduce inequality and spur economic growth, all while tackling climate change and working to preserve our oceans and forests. And throughout everything that we do, socially impactful and environmental wise, and under social value, it captures that environmental stewardship. Under the heading of social value, we're thinking about all of those things. And the mechanism for doing so is through a social value portal in this particular procurement. But what we're thinking about is our responsibility to the people and planet of the communities in which we serve. And so for this procurement, we'll be using the social value portal. I'm going to click over and give you a demonstration in a second. But just to say that when you're referencing for it, you can log in, and the reference is a capital S, and then it's a lowercase l, 0, and then the hyphen will already be in there, 4 zeros, another hyphen, a further 0, lowercase ep, uppercase F, and then 7. And you can click through this registration link if you haven't already when you get the slide deck. But if I head over now into the social value portal, once you've logged in, you'll put your reference here to that particular opportunity. You'll agree to the terms and conditions, and it'll end up in your project list. So if I click into it now, Social Value Portal is actually very intuitive to use, but there's lots of embedded guidance in there as well. So I'm going to do a super quick whistle-stop tour. I'm just going to show you how to add a theme, an outcome, or a measure, add a TOM. And then if you need any further help at all, there's lots of stuff embedded, but you can always come back to me also. So I'm in batch 750, 89794, school bus and swimming services. And the first thing I'm going to do is add a TOM. So if I go in here, and I've got some notes on the next slide, but what I'm first going to do is I'm going, for this particular demonstration, I'm just going to go to the environment. So it's brought up themes, outcomes, and measures that are all referenced on the screen. I'm going to pick one. I'm just going to pick the first one for the purposes of a demonstration only. And then I'm going to click on Add Selected. And that brings me to the TOM. So we have a box here, and what it's asking us to do in this particular one, and they are all different, it's asking me to put my baseline CO2 emissions in. I can choose whether it's in tons or kilogram. I'm going to keep it in tons, and it's asking me for what the estimated saving on CO2 emissions are. So I'm just going to put 50 in for the purposes of this demonstration. When I've added my numbers, you can see that it automatically calculates the proxy value. So if I click Save, what it will do is it'll highlight in orange that we've not added a target description, and we need to do that when we're submitting. So we'll go into there and we'll click Add. And what each of the TOMs has is a target description. Now, it's a big one, is this one actually, but if you read through it, it will tell you the kinds of information that you need to submit in this description box. So describe the initiatives that you're going to put in place to achieve identified savings in CO2 emissions on the contract against the specified baseline, including timeframes. So you have 1,000 characters, and you will obviously write whatever is pertinent to your organisation. But I'm going to just put something in here very quickly. We are using electric buses, which has halved our CO2 emissions. And I'm going to hit Save. Okay. And so you will go through whatever the themes are that you want to add. So we'll go add a TOM. It will bring up whatever themes you want. You can add as many as you like through the Social Value Portal. And it will, if you don't go to any themes, it literally lists them straight down. So you can see I've already added NT31 because that's the one that we did through the demonstration. So you don't have to select them through here. You can literally go through them as a list if you want to. And so some tips on social value. So just note NT1, which if I go in here, is about jobs. It's about the number of direct local employees hired or retained on the contract. So that NT1, it's not scored, and it's not scored to help simplify bid requirements. So you can still make a proposal if you want to around NT1 about any job retention or job creation if you want to, but it won't get scored on that particular measure. And there is a note that, again, the Combined Authority were really keen for all bidders to be aware of. So in social value in public procurement, it's generally always the case. You will be no doubt doing lots of really great stuff, but what the contract is looking for is not really information about initiatives that you already deliver, but what more you will be able to offer as a direct result of securing the contract. So you can include initiatives you already deliver if you're focusing on the additional elements that will be delivered via the contract. But what we don't do is just tell the story of all the things that we're already doing. What we're really interested in a public procurement context is, if you are successful in winning this contract, what more can you do as a result of that, and what impact will that have locally? And so it's that additionality that it's always looking for in almost every public procurement competition. So some common pitfalls in bids. Some of these, again, will feel super obvious, not answering the question. We've talked about that already. One of the other things I would say around that is you don't need to repeat the question in the answer, especially when there's a word count that will just use up precious word count that we probably need to actually answer the question. So we don't need to repeat it in the answer box. If you're asked to submit documentation, make sure you've submitted it, because it's very difficult to score you without. Caveating is an interesting one. Generally speaking, and there are exceptions to this, but very few, generally speaking, if you need to caveat something, you probably needed to ask a clarification question. So if you think you might be saying, well, if I do it X way, then it will cost Y. And if I do it Y way, it will cost Z. It's really difficult for evaluators to compare apples with apples if you're using caveats. If you needed to check something, do so through the clarification process. But unless it's really relevant and it's embedded in the type of question from a scenario perspective, don't caveat in your answers wherever possible. That specification match is really important. You need to know and be confident and sure that you can deliver what's required in the statement of requirements for the combined authority in this case, or any procurement. And whilst I would never advocate that everything has to be written from scratch, if you are using previous bids, make sure that it's relevant, that it's proportionate, and that all references to anybody else has been removed. Whatever you write down, and only what you write down, is what you'll be judged on. So it needs to be accurate, it needs to be spelt right, and it needs to be proportionate and right for this particular bid, excuse me. That lack of evidence is really important. So if you imagine you're asking yourself, so what all of the time? So if you're saying, I can do this, or I will do this, or I have done this, ask yourself the so what question. Like, can you show me how you've done it? Can you show me how you will do it? Can you evidence those things? If you're making a claim about, we are brilliant at training our drivers, have you said how? Have you shown how? If you haven't, it will be really hard to score that statement. Excuse me, sorry. If you're missing key information, that will be detrimental to the scoring because it's key information. So make sure that you do include all information that you're asked for. Be aware of any constraints, word and page count that we've talked about. From an assumption perspective, don't make assumptions that whoever will be evaluating this will be a technical expert in the service. Don't assume that they know what acronyms mean. So if you're using things like acronyms, spell them out at least once. So that people have a fair idea of what you're saying. Evaluators won't go and check. They can't just go and Google. They can't assume that they have got it right. We need to spell things out for an evaluator. And even if you're an incumbent provider to the service, you can't assume that they will take anything other than your bid into account. So you will only be judged on what you write down in that bid. So you don't assume that just because they know you, that they can use anything of prior knowledge, that we're not allowed in evaluation to judge anything other than what's written down, and we must take it at face value. And finally, that selection compliance, that selection questionnaire compliance. Do you have everything you need in your toolkit? Do you have your policies, your accreditations, your licenses? Are you technically capable of doing it? Are you financially stable enough to win this contract? Do you meet the thresholds? Can you reference other contracts of this type? And if not, can you write down a statement of confidence that will allow the contracting authority to be confident that you can deliver if you're successfully awarded the contract? If you think you might struggle with SQ compliance, please do give Go for Growth a shout, because we can definitely help you go through the standard selection questionnaire and help you work out where we've got some gaps and how to get over those gaps. So do give us a shout. And the key messages really for this procurement are, and really actually probably for most procurements, read all of the, well, every procurement, read all of the documents carefully, make a note of those key dates. Ask any questions that you have as early as possible through the clarification process. In this case, it was the 9th of September at 12 p.m. Check safeguarding requirements. In this particular procurement, there are more detail in the contract terms on safeguarding requirements. TUPE may apply to lots of service-based procurement, so make sure you understand the implications of it. And I'll say again, have you signed the TUPE confidentiality agreement for this particular procurement? Have you ensured that your social value initiatives are additional as a result of securing the contract? What will you do, not what you already do? Have you uploaded everything for submission? So that's on slide 6 when you get it. And then for any procurement process that you ever go through, check, double check and triple check before submission. Have you got everything? Are they in the right order? Have you uploaded everything? Are you comfortable and confident that you've done everything you needed to do for that particular submission? And then finally, we know it can feel like a bit of a lonely place bidding, but you're not alone. Go for Growth is working with the Combined Authority to support anyone right the way throughout the process. So the deadline is the 24th, so that's next week. But if you, the week after, I think, if you have any process questions or need any help at all, we are here. There's a number of ways you can get to us. So you can email me, both our central email address and my email address and my mobile number are on the screen. You can use our bookable calendar here also, but there's actually lots of resources on our website. So if you go to our website, membership resources in the top right-hand corner, you can filter to bid skills, for example. There's lots of stuff in there. So please do feel free to have a route around and see what the most useful resources are, but do get in touch if there is anything that you need. And if you'd like to stay in touch with Go for Growth outside of this, you can opt in to our roundup. We do a roundup once a month. We don't spam. We talk about things that we think are relative to public procurement only, really. But you can get updates by scanning the QR code, or you can sign up through that link. And of course, as with anything GDPR related these days, you can opt out at any time. And that's it from me. I realise I've covered a lot in the last 36 minutes. I will stop sharing and just see if we've got anything in the Q&A. We don't look to have at the minute. If you do find that you've got any questions outside of this session, please do feel free to get in touch. We are here to help. Those contact details, hopefully the slide deck will come out. If not today, it will definitely be Monday at the latest. You can always get in touch with us at Go for Growth. If it's a question that's relating to price or your technical capability in terms of transport, as clarifications have finished now, we wouldn't be able to process those through to the Combined Authority. So, and we can only try and support with process itself in terms of bidding. But if you do have any questions on process, please do get in touch. There is nothing in the Q&A. I know everyone's super busy, so I won't keep us here. So all that remains for me to say is thank you ever so much to everyone for joining today. I hope the session has been useful. We are here to help. Good luck with your submission if you do go on to bid. And please do feel free to get in touch and have a good rest of your Friday. Thank you ever so much, everyone.